The building had 42 floors, and no forgiveness. That was how Daniel Marsh had always thought of it. Vertex Technologies' Manhattan headquarters. A tower of mirrored glass that swallowed the sky and reflected nothing human back. At 6 in the morning, when the city was still gray and the sidewalks glistened with black ice, the building looked like a weapon pointed upward. Daniel liked it at that hour. Empty. Honest. He pushed his cart through the lobby, nodding to the overnight security guard, a heavy-set man named Gordon who had never once asked Daniel a personal question in 14 months. That suited Daniel fine. He took the service elevator to the 31st floor, the design and engineering suite, parked his cart in the utility alcove, and began. The routine was precise. Vacuum first, trash second, surfaces third, windows last. He moved through the open-plan workspace the way water moves through a channel, following the same path every night, disturbing nothing, leaving everything cleaner than he found it. But he always stopped at the main design table. It was a custom setup, a 12-foot drafting surface with embedded touchscreens, surrounded by mounted displays showing 3D renders of whatever the team was currently building. Tonight, as with most nights this week, it was Project Helix. He'd read that name off the top sheet 2 months ago and hadn't needed to read it since. He stood for a moment. Just looked. The current render rotated slowly on the center screen, a modular infrastructure architecture for a distributed data processing system. Clean lines. Elegant in its ambition. The kind of design that would look brilliant in a press release and fall apart in production. He could see it, the way you can see a crack in a frozen lake before anyone else thinks to look. The input validation layer was wrong. Not catastrophic, not the kind of wrong that screams. The quiet kind. The kind that hums along for weeks and then, under load, under real-world stress, simply stops. Daniel stood there for 40 seconds. Then he set down his spray bottle, put on the pair of thin cotton gloves he kept in his chest pocket for handling equipment, and made 4 small adjustments to the design schematic on the secondary tablet. The working draft. Not the presentation copy. 4 changes, each one precise. Each one the difference between a bridge that holds and a bridge that doesn't. He picked up his spray bottle, finished cleaning the table, moved on. He was done by 7:15. He clocked out at the service entrance, walked 3 blocks to the crosstown bus, and rode it to the outer edge of Astoria, where the streets were quieter and the buildings shorter. He climbed the stairs of his building. The elevator had been broken since October, and let himself into the apartment. His daughter was still asleep. Lily was 8 years old and looked, sleeping, almost exactly like her mother had. The same stillness. The same particular angle of her head against the pillow. Daniel stood in the doorway for a moment, long enough to feel the ache settle in his chest and then subside, the way it always did. Then he went to the kitchen and started breakfast. At 9:15 that same morning, the 31st floor was a different world. The design suite was loud with keyboards and low voices, the overhead lights on full, 4 of the 8 mounted screens showing live system status. The team lead, a meticulous man named Carter Webb, was running through the morning review with 3 junior engineers when the floor went quiet. Emma Calloway had entered the room. She was 36. Sharply dressed, always today a charcoal blazer over a black turtleneck. Hair pulled back without a strand out of place. She carried a tablet and the expression of someone who had already won 3 arguments before most people had finished their coffee. She was the youngest CEO in Vertex's 20-year history. She had gotten there by being right, consistently, in rooms full of people who assumed she wouldn't be. "Walk me through it," she said to Carter, without preamble. Carter Webb pulled up the Helix presentation schematic on the main display. He talked. Emma listened without interrupting, which meant she was already 3 steps ahead and waiting for him to catch up. Then she noticed. She leaned forward. Her eyes moved across the secondary tablet, the working draft, and stopped. "Carter, yes? Did someone change this?" Her finger hovered over the input validation layer without touching it. 4 small alterations. Subtle. But she had memorized every line of this design. Carter looked. His expression shifted. I don't think any of us." Pull the access log. It took 2 minutes. The log showed no authorized user touch. But the camera footage 31st floor was fully monitored showed. At 6:47 a.m. a figure in gray work clothes bending over the secondary tablet. Gloves on. Making changes. Emma watched the footage twice without speaking. "The janitor," Carter said, quietly. "Get him in here." They called the building management office. Someone called Daniel's phone. He was at a parent-teacher meeting at Lily's school. His phone was on silent, but he saw the number, felt the particular weight of a work call at an inconvenient hour, and stepped into the hallway. He was back at the building by 10:40. Still in his street clothes, a worn canvas jacket, dark jeans. He rode the elevator to the 31st floor and stepped out to find Emma Calloway waiting in the middle of the room, arms crossed. The camera footage paused on the large display screen behind her. It showed him, blurred but recognizable, at the design table. The room was very still. "Mr. Marsh." Her voice was level, controlled, not loud. The kind of quiet that meant she didn't need volume. "Yes. Did you alter this design?" He looked at the screen, then at the working tablet, which had been moved to the center table. He could see his 4 changes clearly from where he stood. "Yes," he said. A breath moved through the room. Emma's jaw tightened. "This is a proprietary design architecture worth approximately $230 million in development investment. You have no clearance to touch it, no clearance to be within 3 feet of it without supervision." "I understand. Then why?" He looked at her directly. He had gray eyes, the kind that felt older than his face. "Because the input validation layer has a structural error. Under distributed load conditions, it will fail. I tried to correct it." The room was quiet for another beat. Emma's expression didn't change. That was the way her face went perfectly still when she was choosing between 2 reactions, and neither of them was acceptable. "You're a janitor," she said. It wasn't a question. It wasn't quite contempt either. It was something more mechanical than that. A categorization. A filing. "I clean this floor." "Yes." "Then you don't diagnose structural errors in a system you're not qualified to evaluate. With respect, security." Emma turned slightly. "Please escort Mr. Marsh out of the building. Building management will receive his termination notice by end of business today." Daniel said nothing more. He didn't argue. He didn't appeal. He looked at the working tablet one more time, his 4 changes still there, still correct, and then he turned and walked to the elevator. Before the doors closed, he said one thing, not loudly, not dramatically, just clearly, as a matter of fact. "If you proceed with that design as it stands, the system will fail under load. That's not a threat, it's a measurement." The elevator doors closed. Emma stood at the window of her corner office on the 40th floor and watched the street below for 30 seconds. Then she picked up her phone and called her COO, a no-nonsense man named Patrick Sauer. "One of the maintenance staff tampered with the Helix working draft," she said. "He's been terminated. I want the file reviewed and any unauthorized changes reverted." "Understood," Patrick said. "We'll have the team revert and re-verify within the hour." "Good." She set the phone down, opened her laptop, went back to the morning's agenda. The day had 9 more hours and 42 line items. She didn't think about Daniel Marsh again. At 12:15, Carter Webb's assistant knocked on the door. "Miss Calloway." The assistant, young, careful, perpetually apologetic, stood in the doorway. "Carter asked me to let you know the Helix system verification is running. They expect it done by 2. "Fine. Also, one of the junior engineers on the team wanted to flag something. But Carter said it wasn't necessary to." "What did the engineer want to flag?" "She said she was looking at the changes the maintenance worker made this morning, and she thinks they might actually—" "Carter reverted them?" "Yes. Then there's nothing to flag." The assistant nodded and left. At 2:07 p.m., the first alarm went off. Emma heard it from her office, not a physical alarm, but the particular pitch of 3 phones ringing at once, and then a knock that was faster than professional. Patrick Sauer opened her door without waiting. His face told her before he spoke. "The system just crashed," he said. All 5 simulation environments. Simultaneously, the 31st floor was a different kind of chaos than the mornings. This was quiet chaos. The kind that happens when technically competent people suddenly can't solve a problem they should be able to solve. Keyboards clicking. Rapid, low conversations. Carter Webb standing at the center display. Ashen. Walking through a diagnostic that wasn't making sense. Emma stood at the edge of the room and watched. The main display showed cascading error logs. Red text stacking on red text. She didn't know every line of code in the Helix system. That wasn't her job, but she had spent enough time in development environments to recognize a structural failure when she saw one. This wasn't a corrupted file. This wasn't a network issue. The architecture itself was broken. "Where's it failing?" she asked Carter. "The input validation layer," Carter said, very quietly. The room went still. Emma heard her own breathing for a moment. "Show me the logs from the last 6 hours." Carter brought them up. She scanned them. The failure pattern was exactly what you'd expect from the kind of flaw Daniel had described, a threading issue under distributed load, manifesting slowly and then all at once. She looked at the display, at the timestamp on the failure, at the timestamp on the morning's camera footage. "Pull up the version we reverted from," she said. "The one the janitor changed? Pull it up." Carter hesitated just briefly, and then did. The 2 versions appeared side by side. The original and the 4-change modification. Emma looked at them for a long time. "He fixed it," said a young engineer near the back of the room. Her name was Rachel Huang, 26, had been on the team for 8 months. She said it quietly, not as an accusation, just as a statement. "The changes he made, they're exactly right. They fixed the threading issue. We reverted to the broken version." The silence that followed was the most expensive silence Emma Calloway had experienced in 5 years as CEO. Her phone rang. The board. She let it ring twice, then answered. "Emma." It was Marcus Aldrin, senior board member, 70 years old, and the kind of patient that felt like pressure. "We're hearing there's a critical failure on Helix." "Correct. We're working it. The stakeholder presentation is in 18 days. If this system isn't operational, I'm aware of the timeline." "Emma, this can't be an 18-day problem. This needs to be resolved today." She looked out across the 31st floor. At the engineers around the table, who had already spent 40 minutes trying to fix what they hadn't built well enough to break correctly. "I'll call you back," she said, and hung up. She turned to Carter. "Can your team implement the corrections?" Carter looked at the screen. Looked at his team. Looked back. "The changes themselves are straightforward. But I want to understand how he knew, because if there are more issues elsewhere in the architecture," he stopped. "I don't know if I can diagnose what I don't know is there." Emma said nothing. "Miss Calloway." Rachel, from the back of the room. I looked up Daniel Marsh. Everyone in the room heard it. The quality of attention shifted. Emma turned to look at her. He was a systems architect at Meridian Labs about 6 years ago, before they merged with Holloway Group. He led the distributed systems division. He built 3 infrastructure frameworks that are still used in production today by 4 Fortune 500 companies. Rachel paused. He was considered one of the best in the field. The room processed this. "Why is he cleaning floors in Midtown?" Carter asked. "His wife died," Rachel said. 6 years ago. Breast cancer. He had a daughter. Very young. He left the industry." She looked at Emma steadily. "His file notes a period of personal leave that became permanent. No scandal, no performance issues." He just stopped. Emma stood very still. The error logs continued stacking on the screen behind her. She didn't send anyone else. That was the thing she understood, without having to think about it. This wasn't something she could delegate. Not a call to HR. Not Patrick Sauer on her behalf. Not a formal letter of re-engagement. She had made this mistake in public, in her own building, in front of her own team. She would correct it the same way. Emma took her coat from the rack behind her office door, a charcoal wool coat. long, good quality, and took the elevator down to the lobby. Gordon at the security desk looked up in mild surprise. She never left the building before 6. Outside, the temperature had dropped. Snow was falling in fine, steady curtains, the kind that accumulates quietly and makes the city look like something other than what it is. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment, shoulders back, eyes adjusting to the white air. She had Daniel Marsh's address from the employment file. She had pulled it herself. It was a 20-minute ride on the subway she almost never took. She stood on the platform with her hands in her pockets, watching the track, not checking her phone for the first time in 6 hours. The train was loud and warm and indifferent. She sat near the door. Across from her, a man in paint-spattered work clothes slept with his head against the window. 2 teenagers talked across each other without looking. An older woman read a paperback with a grocery bag balanced on her lap. Emma Calloway watched them and felt something she didn't have a precise word for. She got off at the Astoria stop and walked 4 blocks north. The snow was thicker out here, less managed. No one had salted these sidewalks. She turned onto a residential block of 5-story walk-ups and looked for the building number. She found it, stood in front of it, buzzed the apartment. Nothing. She buzzed again. Then she heard footsteps on the stairs, descending, and the door opened, and it wasn't Daniel. It was Lily, 8 years old. A purple coat 2 sizes too big, a backpack covered in iron-on patches, a small planet, a cartoon fox, a yellow star, brown hair coming out of its braid. She looked up at Emma with the direct, unsentimental gaze of a child who has not yet learned to pretend she isn't assessing you. "Hi," Lily said. "Hello," Emma said. "I'm looking for your father. He said we were going to the library." Lily looked past Emma at the snow. "He's getting the mail. He'll be right back." She said this the way children say things, as information delivered, without context, without politics. Then she looked at Emma's coat. "That's a nice coat," she said. "Thank you. It's a waste in the snow, though." Emma blinked. That's probably true. Daniel came around the corner of the building with an envelope in his hand and stopped when he saw her. He looked at Emma. Then at Lily. Checking. The way parents check a quick read of the scene. Cataloging everything at once. "Dad," Lily said. "She says she knows you." Daniel said nothing for a moment. He was still wearing the canvas jacket from this morning. He looked more tired in this light. The kind of tired that lives in the face, not just the eyes. Emma said, "I need to speak with you." "I heard you the first time," he said. Not unkindly, just directly. "Babo," Lily said quietly, tugging his sleeve. It was a word Emma didn't recognize, some private family word, the kind that means nothing outside its own context. "It's cold." Daniel looked at his daughter. Something moved in his face, not softness exactly, but a shift, like a door opening an inch. He looked back at Emma. "Library's 2 blocks, he said. "We can talk on the way." They walked in the cold, Lily between them, holding her father's hand. The snow fell in the particular way it does on residential streets in Queens, softly, without audience. Emma spoke plainly. She had decided, on the train, to skip the formalities. The preamble. The strategic framing. "The system failed at 2 p.m., she said. "Exactly the way you said it would. We reverted your corrections this morning, which made it worse. We've been trying to fix it for over 2 hours, and we can't." Daniel walked, didn't respond immediately. "I reviewed your record," Emma continued. "I know who you are, what you've built. That was a long time ago. The knowledge wasn't. It doesn't matter what I know." He said it without bitterness, just flatly. The way someone states a physical law. "I work nights. I clean floors. That's the arrangement." "It was the arrangement," Emma said. "I'd like to change it." Lily was quiet, which meant she was listening to everything. Emma stopped walking. Daniel stopped a half-step later, turned to face her. She looked at him directly. "I fired you this morning without hearing you. You told me the design was wrong. I didn't ask how you knew. I didn't ask why you changed it. I made an assumption about you that was wrong, And I acted on it. She paused. I'm telling you this in front of your daughter. Which means I'm telling you, I mean it. Lily looked up at her father. Daniel stood still in the snow. You don't owe me anything, Emma said. Not an answer. Not your time. But the company has a $230 million project failing in real time. And you are the only person I have encountered in 3 years at Vertex who looked at that system and actually saw it. A long pause. Snow accumulated on Daniel's shoulders. He didn't seem to notice. What are you asking? Come back. Look at the system. Tell us what's wrong and what to do. As what? Emma held his gaze. Whatever title you want. Whatever terms you set, Lily said, from somewhere near their elbows, Babo. The library's still open till 9. Daniel looked down at his daughter. She was looking up at him with an expression that was entirely her own, not pushing, not pleading, just present, watching him. The way kids watch parents when they sense something large is being decided. He looked back at Emma. I'll come, he said. But I'm taking her to the library first. Emma felt something release in her chest. Quietly, without drama. I'll wait, she said. They returned to the building at 4:30. The 31st floor had gone from loud chaos to the specific quiet of people who have been working on an unsolvable problem for too long. 3 engineers were still at the main table. Rachel Huang was on the phone in the corner. Carter Webb was at the window, his back to the room. Daniel Marsh walked in, wearing his canvas jacket. The room noticed. It was the kind of noticing that happens without movement, a collective stilling, a recalibration. Carter turned from the window. Daniel looked at the main display. The error logs were still running. He walked toward the table. And people moved, not because he asked them to, but because the room's instinct was already adjusting. May I? He looked at Carter, who nodded once. Daniel sat down. He was quiet for a long time. Not thinking. Quietly, actively reading. His eyes moved through the logs, the way someone reads a language they've known for 20 years. Cross-referencing. Building the map. The 4 changes I made this morning were a patch, he said, without looking up. They would have held for the demonstration. But the underlying architecture has a more fundamental issue. Where? Carter asked. The concurrency model. Daniel pulled up the base architecture file. You're using a shared state approach for the routing layer. Which means under real distributed load, not simulated. Actual, you'll get race conditions. The input validation fix buys you time. But the routing layer will eventually produce inconsistent states. Rachel had come off her phone call and was at the table now, looking over his shoulder. Can it be fixed? Emma asked from the doorway. Yes. Daniel was already typing. Not asking. Not waiting, typing. It'll take a few hours. I'll need 2 engineers who can implement in parallel. Carter looked at his team. Rachel. Singh. Arjun Singh, 28. Quiet, excellent. Move to the secondary station. Rachel took the 3rd. What happened over the next 3 hours was not dramatic in the way that would make a good story for a press release. There were no visible breakthroughs. No single eureka moment. There was careful, sustained, technically precise work. Daniel identifying the issue, explaining the fix, Rachel and Arjun implementing while he verified, Carter watching and learning, asking questions he wasn't too proud to ask. Emma stayed. She didn't hover. She sat in the glass-walled conference room adjacent to the suite, visible through the glass, available if needed. She answered board calls and put them off with the specific kind of confidence that means, it's being handled. At 7:48 p.m., Rachel said, running verification. The room went still. The display showed a progress bar, then a status screen, then Helix system verification, all environments nominal. No one cheered. Engineers don't cheer the way press releases suggest they do. But something moved through the room, a long collective exhale, a physical release of tension. Rachel looked at Daniel. That was really something. He was already closing the files he'd opened, tidying the workspace the way he always did, Arjun said, quietly, to no one in particular. He found 3 issues we didn't even know were there. Emma found him in the hallway, waiting for the elevator. "Thank you," she said. Daniel nodded. "I'd like to offer you a position." Formally. Not an apology dressed up as a job offer, an actual position. Technical Architecture Director. You'd oversee system design review for all major projects. Set your own schedule. Work around your daughter. She paused. You'd have an office on this floor. The elevator arrived. He didn't get on. He turned and looked at her. "Why?" She blinked. "Because you're the best systems architect I've encountered since I took this role. That's why you want to hire me," he said it simply. Not a correction, a clarification. "What I'm asking is, why do you think I'd want to come back?" Emma was quiet. This was the thing, she was less practiced at the question that wasn't about competence or strategy or interest alignment. The human one. "I don't know that you would," she said, finally. "I think you walked away from this industry for reasons I don't fully understand. I don't know if you miss it or if you'd rather never think about it again. I only know that tonight you fixed a system in 3 hours that my team couldn't crack in 6. And I watched you do it, and the way you worked." She stopped. Chose the next word carefully. "You weren't doing it for me. You were doing it because the problem was there." A long pause. Daniel looked at the elevator doors for a moment. They had closed. He hadn't moved. "My daughter finishes school at 3:15. You leave at 3. I work remotely when she's home. We'll set that up. I don't come in on school events." Noted. "And I want to review every system before it goes to build phase. Not as a formality, actually review it. Actually be listened to." Emma met his eyes. "Yes." He was quiet for another moment. "Okay," he said. She offered her hand. He shook it. Brief, firm. She said, "I should have asked you your name this morning instead of asking security to remove you." Daniel almost smiled. It was a slight thing, a shift at the corner of his mouth. "You were under pressure. That's not an excuse." "No," he said. "It's not. But it's a reason." The elevator arrived again. This time he got on. She watched the doors close. She stood in the hallway for a moment, alone. The 31st floor hummed its ordinary hum. Then she went back to her office and called Marcus Aldrin. "Helix is operational," she said. "We've also identified a significant structural flaw in our review process that I'll be addressing this week." "What kind of flaw?" Marcus asked. She thought about the right way to say it. "The kind," she said, "where we weren't looking at the whole picture." 3 days later, Emma called an unscheduled meeting with the full board. There were 9 of them, the expected cross-section of old money and new money, and the professional class that moves between both. They sat around the long table on the 42nd floor with the city visible through 3 walls of glass. Most of them had known Emma Calloway for years. They had watched her be right so often that they had begun to mistake it for inevitability. She stood at the head of the table and told them the truth. "On Thursday morning, I terminated a member of the building maintenance staff for making unauthorized changes to a proprietary design document." She paused. Those changes were correct. Within 2 hours of reverting them, the Helix system experienced a critical failure. The employee I terminated returned that evening and resolved the issue, along with 3 additional structural vulnerabilities our engineering team had not detected. The room was quiet. His name is Daniel Marsh. He was formerly the lead systems architect at Meridian Labs, where he built infrastructure frameworks that are still in production across multiple Fortune 500 organizations. I've asked him to join Vertex as Technical Architecture Director, and he has accepted. Marcus Aldrin, at the far end of the table, leaned back slightly. He had the expression of a man revising an estimate. "You're introducing him to the board?" said a woman named Caroline Vance, second largest shareholder, known for her habit of asking the question no one else was phrasing. "Or reporting an HR decision?" "Both," Emma said. "I'm telling you this because it reflects a gap in how we've been operating. We had someone with significant technical knowledge working in this building, and we had no mechanism, no culture that would allow that knowledge to reach the people who needed it. That's a structural problem. I intend to address it. A project, said a younger board member, a man named Theodore Ferris, who had the habit of reducing things to their simplest form to see if they held. I'm saying Daniel Marsh saved the project, Emma said. Yes. She pulled up the before and after system diagnostics on the display screen. 4 pages of comparison. She walked them through it carefully, technically, without softening. When she was done, she looked around the table. I made an error in judgment on Thursday morning, she said. I corrected it. I'm presenting this to the board because I believe transparency about leadership mistakes is more valuable than the impression of infallibility. The room was quiet for a long moment. Marcus Aldrin said finally, Is the system stable? Yes. And the stakeholder presentation in 15 days? We're on track. He looked at her for another moment, one of those assessments she could never entirely read, and then nodded, once, the way he did when he had decided something. Good, he said. Thank you, Emma. Caroline Vance, across the table, said, I'd like to meet Mr. Marsh. I'll arrange it, Emma said. Daniel's first official day was a Monday. He arrived at 8:30, not 7, the schedule they'd agreed on. He wore a dark sweater and carried a bag that held a laptop and, Emma would notice later, a child's drawing paperclipped to the inside of the front pocket. She didn't ask about it. She introduced him to the team formally. Short, factual, no theater. This is Daniel Marsh, Technical Architecture Director. Starting today, no major system goes to build phase without his sign-off. I'd like you to treat his review as you'd treat mine. She paused. Questions? Rachel Huang raised her hand. Will he be reviewing the backlog of existing systems? Or only new projects? Both, Daniel said. Before Emma could answer, Rachel nodded. Great. Carter Webb, who had, over the previous 3 days, done the interior work of a man updating his map of the world, offered his hand. Daniel shook it. I want to walk through the existing architecture stack this week, Daniel said to Carter, not as a critique. I want to understand what you've built. Yeah, Carter said. I'd like that. It was not a dramatic transformation. The floor didn't suddenly become some frictionless ideal of collaboration. There were hard conversations in the first 2 weeks' moments, when Daniel's read on a system conflicted with 3 months of work a team had invested in, and the team had to decide whether to defend their approach or interrogate it. Mostly they interrogated it. Mostly Daniel was right, but not always twice. He revised his own assessment after Arjun Singh walked him through implementation constraints he hadn't fully accounted for. That was the thing that settled it. For the team. The second time Daniel said I was wrong about the threading approach, Singh's right. Let me revise. The room relaxed in a way it hadn't since Thursday's collapse. He wasn't there to be right. He was there to get it right. It was a distinction that mattered. At 3 o'clock every afternoon, Daniel left. Exactly 3. No exception, no apology. He said goodbye without ceremony, picked up his bag, and went. The first time, a junior engineer named Blake Hartley, 23, recently hired, still learning how the room worked, made a small remark under his breath. Something about must be nice. Rachel Huang looked at him. He worked nights for 1.5 years to be here during the day for his daughter, she said, quietly but not privately. He gave up a career at the top of the field because his wife died. You could afford to miss a few happy hours. Blake did not make that remark again. Emma noticed, around the 3rd week, that she had begun adjusting her schedule to the rhythm of the floor rather than the inverse. Not intentionally it happened, the way habits form, incrementally, functionally, below the threshold of decision. She started taking her lunch in the 31st floor conference room. Accessible. Present. Not managing present. She started asking questions instead of delivering verdicts. Not all the time. She was still herself, direct, decisive, impatient with vagueness. But there was a calibration shift, and she was aware of it without being entirely sure what had caused it. One afternoon, waiting for the elevator at 5:15, she found herself standing next to Rachel Huang. Can I ask you something? Emma said. Sure. The morning of the failure. Before it happened, You wanted to flag the changes Daniel had made, and I shut it down. Yes. What stopped you from pushing harder? Rachel was quiet for a moment. Honestly, the floor was already running at threat level. I wasn't sure I was right enough to fight for it. And she paused. When someone at your level says no that fast, it communicates a cost. You have to decide if the information is worth the cost. Emma looked at the elevator doors. It was, she said. I know that now, Rachel said. I knew it then too. I just didn't trust it enough. They rode the elevator down in silence that was not uncomfortable. That's going to change, Emma said, as they reached the lobby. The part where the cost of speaking up feels higher than the cost of staying quiet. I'm working on it. Rachel looked at her. Okay, she said. And then, with the kind of directness that only people who have earned a certain amount of trust can manage. Good. The thing Emma hadn't accounted for was the daughter. 2 weeks in, a Friday afternoon, Daniel was 5 minutes from leaving when a call came to the main desk, the school. A minor issue, nothing serious, but could someone come early to get Lily? She'd had a small fall in the gym. She was fine, but shaken. Emma happened to be standing near the desk when the call came through. She went herself. She told herself it was efficient. She had a car. The school was 12 minutes away. It made sense. These were the kinds of arguments that are mostly true, but not entirely. She arrived at the school just as Daniel's bus was pulling up. She'd beaten him by 4 minutes. Traffic cooperating. Lily was in the school office, sitting on a low bench, holding an ice pack to her elbow. A small scrape. She was not crying. She was reading a book. The ice pack balanced with the focused practicality of a child who has decided the situation is under control. She looked up when Emma walked in. Oh, Lily said. You're the coat lady. I am, Emma said. Is my dad coming? He's right behind me. Are you okay? Lily considered the question with unusual seriousness for someone 8 years old. My elbow hurts, she said, but I think it's more the surprise than the pain. I wasn't expecting the floor. Emma sat down on the bench next to her. That's usually how floors work. Yeah. Lily looked at her ice pack. Are you my dad's new boss? Yes. Is he doing good? He's doing very well. Lily nodded, apparently satisfied. He used to do this at home. Just look at things and fix them. He'd look at the TV cable and fix it. Or look at my bike and know what was wrong before he even touched it. She paused. I think he missed it. Emma looked at her. Having the big problems, Lily clarified. The cable and the bike are small. I think he needed a bigger one. Daniel came through the door, then slightly breathless, having run from the bus stop, and his eyes found Lily immediately and went through the same quick catalog. Intact, calm, not in distress. He sat down beside her. She leaned against him naturally. The way water finds its level. Hey, bird, he said. Hi, Babo. He looked at Emma over Lily's head. She said nothing. He said nothing. But something moved between them, a kind of mutual acknowledgement, unspoken, of the particular strangeness and rightness of this moment. Then Lily said, Can we get soup on the way home? Sure, Daniel said. Can she come? Lily asked. Daniel looked at Emma with the careful expression of someone who has learned to read the difference between politeness and desire. Emma said, I shouldn't. You don't have to, Lily said, with the easy pragmatism of children who aren't yet invested in being refused gracefully. I just thought you might want to. The soup place has really good bread. Emma was quiet for a moment. What kind of soup? She asked. Tomato, Lily said. But not the kind from a can. The real kind. Emma looked at Daniel. He raised an eyebrow, slightly, the ghost of a question. Okay, Emma said. Soup. It was a small place. The soup restaurant. 4 tables, a chalkboard menu. A teenager behind the counter who took their order with the efficiency of someone who had somewhere else to be. They sat at the table nearest the window. The snow had mostly stopped now, leaving the street clean and quiet. The evening light was that particular winter shade of deep blue-gray that makes Manhattan look, briefly, like a different city than it is. Lily ate her soup with the focused attention of someone who takes food seriously. She told them, between spoonfuls, about the fall, the gym floor, the sock that slipped, the way it felt like flying for exactly half a second, and then very much didn't. She had the storytelling instincts of someone who has spent time with an attentive parent. Detail, sequence, punchline. Emma listened and realized she couldn't remember the last time she had eaten a meal without checking her phone. She didn't check her phone. Daniel broke his bread and watched his daughter and looked. For the first time in the weeks Emma had known him, entirely unguarded. The particular tiredness she had seen in his face at the apartment building was still there. It lived in him permanently, probably the way some losses do. But under it was something else. Not happiness, exactly. Steadiness. He was, she thought, a man who had decided what mattered. At one point, Lily looked up and said, to neither of them in particular, "This is nice." It was a child's observation. Simple. Categorical. The kind that lands differently than it should. Neither of the adults responded immediately. Then Daniel said, "Yeah, it is." Emma was quiet. She looked at the bread in her hands, at the snow outside, at the chalkboard menu with its 3 soup options. "It is," she agreed. They walked back to the subway station together, Lily between them, telling them about a science project involving baking soda and vinegar, and a model volcano that had, by her account, been more successful than expected. She held her father's hand and, at one point, briefly, Emma's. "Emaliat here." At the station entrance, they stopped. Daniel and Lily were heading north. Emma was heading downtown. The city noise returned traffic, cold air, the particular bass note of a city that doesn't stop. "Same time Monday?" Emma said to Daniel. "Same time Monday," he said. Lily waved. "Bye, coat lady." Emma smiled. It was a full smile, not the measured professional kind, not the strategic kind. The real kind, which felt slightly strange on her face, like a muscle that hadn't been used in a while. "Goodbye, Lily," she said. She went down the stairs. She didn't look back. She stood on the platform and thought about the weeks between this moment and the morning she had watched a man in gray work clothes get escorted out of a lobby. She thought about what she had been so certain of that morning, about the particular efficiency of certainty, the way it streamlines everything, removes friction, allows you to move fast. And the cost, the thing you pay for moving fast through a room without looking at the people in it. The train arrived with a rush of warm air. She got on, found a seat. Across the car, a man in a delivery uniform was eating something wrapped in foil. An elderly woman had a small dog under her jacket, just the ears visible. 2 college students were asleep against each other's shoulders. Emma Calloway looked at them and felt, not sentimentality exactly, but a specific kind of attention. The kind that asks, "Who is this person? What do they know that I don't?" It was a question she was going to have to get better at asking. She was already working on it. 3 weeks later, the Helix stakeholder presentation went flawlessly. Daniel Marsh sat in the second row, not the front. When the system performed under a live distributed load test the first time it had been tested at full scale, and the metrics came back clean and the room exhaled, he was already thinking about the next layer. Rachel Huang caught his eye from across the room and nodded once. He nodded back. He left at 3 o'clock. The building was still 42 floors of glass and steel. But something about it had changed. Or rather, something had been corrected. The way a system is corrected, carefully, specifically, at the level where the actual fault lives. Lily finished her volcano project. It received an A-. The minus was for excessive eruption, which she considered a compliment. Emma Calloway started taking the subway.